This is everything from this week. Everything I wrote, everything I read, everything I learned, the stories I was revising, the exact revisions I made, submissions, the spreadsheets, the fears, the doubts, the hopes, the dreams, explosive moments about literature. If it's your first time here, my name's Asa Merritt. I wrote 6 sermons, an Audible original starring Stephanie Hsu. I'm a writer. Now I have moved on from script writing into the land of short fiction, giving it my all with you here on YouTube. So get comfortable. There's a table of contents. If you want to check out various pieces of this video, I encourage you to do so. If you just want to vibe out and just be with me as I was this past week in my writer brain, just let it rip. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. I'm starting the week with this live stream, which is a live stream where I set goals, set intentions, share with everyone on the Discord, with you live in the moment, Monday morning, everything that I want to achieve this week. They say if you say these goals out loud, they're more likely to happen. So that's exactly what I'm doing this morning. The agenda is I want to talk about one big idea. I want to talk about money and how that affects my writing practice. I want to talk about the concrete stories I'm working on, what I'm reading. I want to read a Keats poem out loud to get language in the bones for the week ahead. The big idea. Y'all, it is hard living in this world where you got to make a lot of money, or you got to make any money. This little thought about money is inspired by a couple things. One, it's inspired by A Room of One's Own, the collection of essays by Virginia Woolf that I want to talk a little bit about. Additionally, it is inspired by this weekend. This past weekend, I was working the entire time. I was working on this gig that was onerous and demanding, and which is we all have to work. This is not something crazy, but it did make me reflect on how much energy it really does take to write because of the amount of energy that I spent this weekend not writing, the amount of energy that I will continue to spend today finishing that project. And I guess I just wanted to say out loud what a privilege it is to have a modicum of financial security, let alone folks that are able to work full-time on their artistic practice. It is so fortunate to have the ability to write and read in peace in a room of one's own, which I'll talk about here shortly, for even just several hours a week. So it just dawned on me how lucky I am to be doing that. And I just want to thank you for being in space for that and applying value to it, because as Virginia Woolf says in her essays, In a Room of One's Own, this is thankless work. She talks about how even in the time of the 19th century where women were scoffed at if they wanted to write literature, even the men trying to write literature, we're going to read John Keats here in a second, there wasn't exactly support. It's not like there was money for John Keats' poetry. And so it's just an upstream battle. And I think it's important to give ourselves permission to see what we're up against, to acknowledge that without a degree of financial stability, it's really hard to make art. That's my big idea of the day. Concrete writing and reading goals this week. I want to continue with the Ray Bradbury challenge that I've set out myself as an alternative to NaNoWriMo for November. What this means is reading one short story a day, one poem a day, one essay a day, and writing one short story a week. This is the challenge that I've given myself. It's interesting to see what parts of that challenge I'm succeeding in, the parts of that challenge that I'm failing in. I think for sure it's taking me longer than a week to finish something. Now, to be fair, Bradbury was writing for a lot of pulp magazines. I don't want to denigrate any of the stories he was writing for at all, but I do think at some level there was probably a way in which he could bang out these stories that is incompatible with the kind of stories that I'm writing right now, but I still have that as kind of my guardrail, as my North Star in terms of what I'm trying to get through. So I want to continue working on that story I was working on called Runaway Story. I want to continue reading. I made it through some of the stories that I was trying to read last week. Some Stephen Graham Jones short stories, some Ted Chiang's short stories. I'm looking back at my books. This Woolf essay, A Room of One's Own, I'm loving. Almost done with that. Going to read a little bit of that this morning. I want to discover Simone Weil, this kind of mystic religious writer who I've been turned on to. I want to read her from her essays. Those are the writing and reading goals of the week. I'm so excited. I'm going to be live streaming all week, every morning around this time. So if you have stuff that you're working on, you're more than welcome to join in. The next part of the puzzle here today is I want to read none other than John Keats. So this is Keats. This is Bright Star. Famous poem. Maybe you read it in high school. I did, but I hadn't read it since. And again, the reason I do this is just to get precision, to get language, to get the senses afresh before a writing week, before a writing day. I'm trying to do this every day. Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendor hung aloft in the night and watching with eternal lids apart, like nature's patient sleepless eremite, the moving waters at their priest-like task of pure ablution round earth's human shores, or gazing on the new soft fallen mask of snow upon the mountains and the moors. No, yet still steadfast, still unchangeable, pillowed upon my fair love's ripening breast, to feel forever its soft fall and swell, awake forever in a sweet unrest, still to hear her tender taken breath, and so live ever, or else swoon to death. That's nice, right? What a nice poem. Anyway, that is the poem of the day, y'all. So to get back into the writing brain, I'm going to do some morning pages right now. With that, I want to get into my unconscious, my intuition, the parts of me most capable of generating good art. So the plan for the next 30, 40 minutes is to do that. And then I'm going to read another chapter of A Room of One's Own. If it's your first time here and if you're into this vibe, be sure to subscribe. And also, you're more than welcome to join a community of writers that is growing. There's the Discord. I'll put the information in the video description. Okay, so I'm going to get down to work. Welcome to the stream. It's Tuesday. I'm writing, I'm reading, I'm submitting a short story today. I have 3 hours ahead of me. Welcome. Pull up a pen, pull up a paper, pull up your book, pull out your computer. It's going to be a good session this morning. We're going to start this off per usual with a poem. Today I want to read a poem I found on the Poetry Foundation called Facing It. Get some language in the bones, get language in the air to inspire us at the top of the day here. And yeah, that's the plan. I even have a cute little slide here that says agenda. So I'm going to read that poem, going to work on some morning pages, briefly jump into Runaway Story. This is the short story that I was working on last week and the week before and continuing to work on. The big takeaway, where I last left that story, was a bit of a realization inspired by Barn Burning, another Faulkner story that I read last week, where that I can invert my current climax. And instead of something happening to my protagonist, I can give my protagonist the opportunity to make a decision in this critical moment. This was a bit of a revelation last week, and I plan to implement that here this morning. Going to go ahead and read Faulkner. There was a recommendation in the Discord to check out a story called That Evening Sun. So we're going to check that out, and then we're going to talk about it. I also want to submit Under the Pear Tree, the other literary fiction story that I've written recently, to some other literary journals, magazines. I have to find those spots that's not up there on the list, but it is a goal here for the next few hours. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Settle in. Let me know what you're working on. Sarah Ray Werner, thank you for being here. Submitting a short story today. I want to submit it to some more places. Essentially, what happened is I found a place to submit it to last week. They have an 8 to 12 month response time and we are okay with simultaneous submissions, meaning I can send it to other places at the same time. And that's what I intend to do. So I found a cool blog post last night about submitting to literary journals for beginners. So I'll share that later on as well, and intend to follow some of that advice and get it out there. So these are my goals. It's a lot that I want to do in the next 3 hours. But the story's quite long, but good luck, everybody. Oh my God, I forgot the poem. Let's read the poem. Okay, this is called Facing It by Woolf Komunyaka. My black face fades, hiding inside the black granite. I said I wouldn't, damn it. No tears. I'm stone. I'm flesh. My clouded reflection eyes me like a bird of prey, the profile of night slanted against morning. I turn this way. The stone lets me go. I turn that way. I'm inside the Vietnam Veterans Memorial again, depending on the light to make a difference. I go down the 58,022 names, half expecting to find mine own in letters like smoke. I touch the name Andrew Johnson. I see the booby trap's white flash. Names shimmer on a woman's blouse, but when she walks away, the names stay on the wall. Brushstrokes flash, a red bird's wings cutting across my stare. The sky, a plane in the sky. A white vet's image floats closer to me. Then his pale eyes look through mine. I'm a window. He's lost his right arm inside the stone. In the black mirror, a woman's trying to erase names. No, she's brushing a boy's hair. That was Facing It by Woolf Komunyaka. So I'm going to take a little break. I want to share how that writing session went for me. I want to share what happened and the surprises that just happened. I want to share a little piece from the story that I'm working on with y'all. The first thing I did there was did some morning pages. You know, if you don't know about morning pages, know about morning pages. They work sometimes, they don't work other times. They work for some people, they don't work for other people. Sometimes they work for me. And I find that one of the uses of morning pages is to kind of download stuff that's going on in your life, emotional turmoil that you can then kind of put on the page away, focus on the task of hand, which is whatever you're working on, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, intersects really cool with what we talked about yesterday and what Virginia Woolf is talking about in A Room of One's Own, and how your own crap can get in the way. That's a sideline. That was the first thing I did. And what I set out to do when in visiting the rewrite, I'm working on this story that I tentatively have titled Runaway Story, is to kind of rewrite the climax, as I mentioned, to give it into the hands of the protagonist a little bit more, to give the protagonist a little more agency to craft a story in which the climax represents a choice that the protagonist makes, and therefore the path to growth. This is kind of iconic, classic craft ideas here, inspired by the way Faulkner does all of those things in his short story, Barn Burning, which I read last week. Anyway, so I set out to do that. That was the plan. But I did not do that because when I started reading through this story, my draft that is, I found that it is still almost unnavigable. This reef is so fraught with various unseen elements in the water that my ship is going to crash unless I do some basic cleaning. Part of it is stylistic. This thing is kind of written in this like stream of consciousness. So what I did instead of working on the climax was clean up the document. And in doing so, I want to show you just a little show and tell here of this like passage I'm working on. I'll read this to you, and then I'll explain what the changes I made. So just Context, this is like a 4,000 word short story. And if you see here, well, I'll just read where it's at. So you can hear where it landed. I left the four-wheeler by the side of the road and unhooked the bungee cords from the rack on the back of the four-wheeler with my right hand and held the bike with my left hand, and then I took the bike in both hands. I leaned the bike against the four-wheeler and reached into my pocket and pulled out a scrunched-up biking reflective vest, and I put it on. I was reckless running away, obviously, but so were the drivers on that stretch, and the bars in Winston don't close, and people keep drinking. And I knew about drinking because that's what everyone said about Rick Bauman, always with the drinking, they said. And they talked about the drinking when they talked about what he did to Jane, and they talked about the drinking after Jane's brother killed him, and more drinking talking when they talked about how he had it coming. So I share all that. Unfortunately, as you can see here by this third thing, that I actually didn't fully succeed in cleaning up the manuscript, because what I did is I made all the changes in the middle section here. You can see all those little itty bitty tiny copy changes that I made, and then just did accept all, but the spacing didn't sustain itself. So that's what happened there. Why I'm sharing all this is just because I'm finding that in embracing a stream of consciousness kind of style, a minimal punctuation kind of style, I still have to have guardrails, and at a certain level, unless there's some kind of like punctuation consistency or idiom throughout the piece, I can't even revise effectively. That's where things stand, is that I went to revise and I was like, this thing doesn't even, this is a story in both Portuguese and Spanish that's legible, but actually doesn't really make sense. So what I need to do is clean it. Just a question, Asa, how old is your protagonist? Hi, Takashi, welcome. 15, currently, in the current draft. The other thing I wanted to do this morning is send out Under the Pear Tree, another short story that I wrote to some other publications this morning. So I really want to start publishing. So you got to send it out. Whew. How's everybody doing? I'm going to talk briefly here about that little writing stretch for me. If you're on a roll, please just keep going. I encourage that. I want to talk today a little bit about the style that I'm trying to pursue in this story. I am really inspired right now by this guy named Jon Fosse. This is a Norwegian Nobel Prize winner, and he has this really cool kind of stream of consciousness style. So I'm just going to put that up on screen here. This is what Google has to say about this. And I'm just going to talk about this briefly and why it inspires me. Essentially, this is in the tradition of, say, a Joyce or a Virginia Woolf or even Faulkner, but it has this even simpler quality that I really love. So this is just some quick hits about him. Jon Fosse uses a unique style of stream of consciousness that is deliberate, slow, and often uses repetition and minimal punctuation, rather than mimicking the frantic chaos of a mind at work. So, Alice at the Fire is this book that I first encountered this style, and it first started working its way into my writing, and I can't recommend that book enough, Alice at the Fire. And to give you a concrete sense of this writing style, here is a passage from that book. And what I'm going to do right now is read part of this. I won't read this whole passage, and then turn to my story, tentatively titled Runaway Story. Night Ride. How's that sound? Night Ride. We'll see how that sounds. And pull up a passage from that, and I just want to kind of share where I'm at with this in terms of figuring out a style for this story. This is from Alice at the Fire by Jon Fosse. As she stands by the window now, Signa, and she looks out at the fjord, the dark fjord, the cold fjord, she thinks, yes, cold and dark. And it was cold that day too, that November day. Cold and gray, yes, gray and cold, she thinks. And she sees him, Asla, in the rowboat, the little rowboat he was rowing. He was going out onto the fjord. And she asked him not to go, didn't she? Yes, she asked him. But he went anyway. He always went on his own way, Asla. And she sees the fire on the shore, the bonfire, Alice's fire. And she's there too, Alice. So, oh my gosh. I mean, this stuff, it just gives me goosebumps. It just gives me goosebumps. Goosebumps to read that. Y'all, that's in translation. And it just like has this like, the elliptical rhythmic quality is so haunting and enchanting to me. And, you know, I'm not Jean Fosse. I am Asa Merritt, and I'm learning how Asa Merritt writes. But I'm inspired by this, and I want to share my little attempt at this. This is, you know, it's a different story. It's a 15-year-old, not a middle-aged woman narrating. There's a lot of things different about this, but I just wanted to show how reading Jean Fosse, being inspired by that style, is making its way into my writing. And here's a little passage. Here's a little passage from this story that I like. I laughed a little, which felt silly when I heard it, but it happened. And I heard the laughter on the quiet road, not completely quiet because the rabbits were out. So many rabbits, and you could hear them running in the brush because they ran at the laugh. But otherwise it was silent, and the laugh and the sound of the rabbits running and all that silence, just the laugh and the rabbits, it made me scared. And I put the other half of my sandwich back in the little pouch that attached to the seat and put the water bottle back in the metal holder. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And after a few seconds, I heard more rabbits running. Anyway, that's me trying that. And I like it. I like it. This is progress. This is progress. So that's what I was doing right now in that last session, was both kind of continuing to clean up the manuscript, which, as you can see, if I'm trying to use a style like this that generally eschews punctuation, disregards periods, then the placement of these commas is so important, and one has to be precise. And, you know, I'm grateful for you for many reasons. But right now, you know, even just planning on sharing this, I was like, okay, what is going to be most clear sharing this? And I'm going to read this aloud. Where do I put the commas to help communicate this sort of set of sentences? Anyway, that's what I got for you. So what I'm going to do next is I want to submit Under the Pear Tree. Under the Pear Tree is another short story in this same universe of dark woods, Pacific Northwest, where I grew up. And I have another, that story's finished. I feel really good about it. I've submitted it one place so far, but I gotta send it out to other places. And so that is what I want to do with the remainder of my work this morning. And let's just start with this amazing passage from A Room of One's Own that I want to read you. Essentially, and then we'll get to the relationship to that, to In the Dream House by Machado. In this chapter last night, this is chapter 5 of A Room of One's Own, the following sentence is read. The context of this is that Virginia Woolf is reading a novel of a contemporary. She's reading a novel by a woman of her time, and she's comparing how that novel stacks up against novels written by women in recent history during this time. She's observing what's capable of fiction for women in the early 1900s. And she comes upon this book written by an unknown writer. And in this book is a hint of maybe two women who like each other romantically. Here's the sentence. For if Chloe likes Olivia, and Mary Carmichael knows how to express it, she will light a torch in that vast chamber where nobody has yet been. So what's happening here is that Woolf is so excited about the potential of this plot line in this book, because she's asserting right here, it's like, hey, listen, no one ever has ever written about this. No one ever has put down on the page a domestic London story about two women who love each other. Obviously, there's a history of queer literature and Sapphos and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But she sees here in this novel potential of expanding our experience of the world, expanding like what kinds of stories exist in this world. And I thought that was a really kind of inspiring idea generally, that our project as writers is to kind of put into the world stories that have never been told, to expand the universe, as it were. So it's a big thought, but I find it really inspiring. And an inversion of that, right? So if this is an example of a love story that hitherto couldn't exist, I want to shine a little light on In the Dream House. This is from the intro of In the Dream House, which I agree, Evan, welcome, is an amazing book, a fantastic memoir. Dare I say, like a must read. This book is transformative. And the intro actually Actually, if you just read the intro, it's pretty amazing. So in the intro of In the Dream House, Machado writes, "Archival silence illustrates a difficult truth. Sometimes stories are destroyed, and sometimes they are never uttered in the first place. Either way, something very large is irrevocably missing from our collective histories." So it's amazing because Woolf is reading this pulp-esque, forgettable, in her words, novel about this love story that, oh my God, is this a new thing in the universe? Similarly, Machado here is talking about all the stories that we'll never know about because they were destroyed. Again, that book is about, an abusive relationship. Mind-blowing stuff for me, at least, that connection. And again, kind of this larger idea is that our job is to make stories in a way or tell them that haven't been told. You know what I'm talking about. Taking this one step further, right, outside of any kind of ideas around representation of certain kinds of stories, another really cool thought that follows in A Room of One's Own is this idea. Above all, you must illumine your own soul with its profound... Hold on, it's so small, stand by. This is Woolf again, from A Room of One's Own. Above all, you must illuminate your own soul with its profundities and its shallows, and its vanities and its generosities, and say what your beauty means to you, or your plainness. So this is taking this same idea of seeing things that have never been seen, or putting down into words things that you're seeing that you can only see, and the value of specific stories, not only in kind of a social context, but in a personal context. Anyway, that all happened for me since I last saw you. Let's get down to business. It's Wednesday. We're writing. I want to start off this morning for myself and for us all and for anyone else who catches this stream with a little bit of a poem. So I went to the Poetry Foundation, which has daily poems, and found the following poem. Just a second. Incidentally, it appears to similarly be about an experience that we have not heard so much about until the last 30, 50 years. Less than. So I'm just going to read this poem for y'all, and then we'll get down to it. So this is called Transfiguration by Sanam Sharif. I have been made anew, like the first hour of sun after days of rain. I have kissed the face of the life that took from me the only life I knew. Made anew, I have let love render me surrendered, naked as a speck of dust in a beam of day let loose from an opened fist. I have kissed the fist open. Open, I have effaced the face of every shame that did not say my truer name. Look, I was given a cage I have come to see as a gift, for it is a cage I can see. Just yesterday, my love bent 2 bars into a bouquet of flowers on a day I did not believe in flowers. I am taking my body beyond its shape. All right, Transfiguration by Sanam Sharif. Y'all, what a world. Okay, so that's the game plan. There's your poem of the day. I'm going to put on a timer. I'm going to work for 2 or 3 hours here. And what I want to achieve, I'm going to write some morning pages, tap in via my unconscious, via handwriting. I'm going to work. Well, first I'm going to submit my short story, trying to get my work out in the world, continue writing my short story, Night Ride, which we talked about yesterday a little bit. Let's go. Everyone, I hope you have a great writing session. I'll be checking in on the hours or so, every 50 or so minutes. Per my agenda here today, I did my morning pages, which was great. There's a lot going on in my personal life right now, so I'm finding it super useful to try to kind of download some of that so I can be in this creative reading, writing space more totally. So the morning pages were great. And then I went on to submit Under the Pear Tree. This is a story that I've completed. And I've kind of been thinking, I think a lot about what do I want to prioritize. It's kind of like no matter what, write every day. No matter what, read every day. And, in making this order of agenda, it's kind of like you'll see today that the writing piece of this, the revising, comes later in the thing. And I just kind of, I don't know, for me where I'm at right now, it's like you have to get your work out there. That is going to sustain you, inspire you to keep writing and just to not let that part of the process languish. It's this navigating between like you need to cultivate a practice, a creative practice. That's priority one. But I'm finding myself that I just always put off submitting stuff. And it's like, especially with this story, Under the Pear Tree, which I really like, I went back and opened it up and I was like, oh, I want to change this sentence in the first paragraph. But per Heinlein's rules that we talked about yesterday, don't rewrite, just send it. That's what I decided to do. And what I did there is I went back to chillsubs.com, which is this database of literary magazines and magazines publications in general, because yesterday I found 6 places to apply to. I gave myself an arbitrary number of 10. These places are really competitive. I'm sticking to competitive spots, not the most competitive. I'm not sending this story to the New Yorker. I'm not sending this story to the Paris Review, but I'm sticking to highly competitive journals, magazines, etc. I only found 6 yesterday that were open, accepting submissions right now, and that fit my criteria or that I fit their criteria. And so I looked, the first thing I did right now was like to see if I could find 4 more to hit that 10, but I only found 1. So I spent like 10 minutes looking for 4 more and only found 1. So I'm like to this point of like, okay, you got to send, no more time, no more dilly-dallying, you got to send the story out. I proceeded and continuing to appreciate how time-consuming all this is. But I did want to share, I did submit this. This is a screenshot from Submittable, which is a website that facilitates a lot of submissions. And one thing that I did also was I wrote out a cover letter for this submission opportunity. I'm just going to put this up and read it here. Because writing the cover letter for these things, seemingly simple, but I'm still trying to figure it out. I've used as my guide this book right here, which is called Playing the Short Game, which is this really nice sort of handbook to the professional world of short fiction. This was written by a Canadian writer named Douglas Smith. This book is new. It's a 2nd edition. It just came out. I watched a workshop on Substack from that guy. Super useful. And in it, he has a very clear template for a cover letter. But my background is a little bit different. The stuff I've done to date isn't exactly prose. In fact, none of it is. So it's like I wanted to show some juice. I'll read my cover letter here in a second. I want to show like some professional credits, but I'm also like, gosh, is this kind of grandstanding because this isn't exactly relevant? So that is a question that I would love to ask Douglas Smith if I could, but I didn't. In any event, if you write cover letters, this is a solid template, and I want to speak about the blacked out pieces specifically because those were illuminating when I read about cover letter strategy and format in this book, is that according to Douglas Smith, the varsity move is to find the names of the editors who you are submitting to. So because a lot of these places are writer blind and so on, I'm anonymizing all of this, but there are 2 names there. There are 2 fiction editors for this particular publication. And yeah, so that is just a tip that he has that I am putting into practice. So this basic format here is like, you know what? I just realized that I made a mistake. I did not put the word count in this cover letter. So c'est la vie, right? Submitting it to 6 other spots. If they don't take it because the word count, then so it goes. This is it, folks. This is me in real time. Everything I'm doing. In any event, this is what I wrote. Please find attached Under the Pear Tree for consideration for the name of the publication. My Audible original series, my Audible original 12-episode series, 6 sermons, starring Stephanie Hsu, was on Audible's 2024 Best of Fiction list and was nominated for an Audie Award. NPR, The Guardian, and Vice, among others, have published my nonfiction. I am the founder of Diario de Terror, a Spanish-language horror writing and performance collective with biannual shows in Mexico City. This story is being simultaneously submitted to other publications. So that was in there because they specifically said in their guidelines to indicate if your story is being simultaneously submitted. So that's that. Thank you for your consideration. Polite conclusion to the letter. That's what I sent. So it's crazy because that was like, I don't know, 40 minutes, and all I don't know, a lot happened there, but I am appreciating how long it takes to find and submit publications. And fortunately, Chill Subs, that website, has a filter option where you can put no fee. So I definitely put no fee because I'm not looking to go broke on submission fees. I can't believe I forgot the workout, y'all. Whatevs. All right, it's onward and upward. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Just wanted to check in, share my progress. So today, just pulling this back up, in fact, the agenda for today includes submit my story under the bear tree. So that's what I've been doing for most of the day. We're already, almost 2 hours into this stream. And I'd say for the most of the day, I've been submitting this piece. But the good news is that in this last work session, I was able to submit this story to four additional places. Or was it five? 4 or 5. I've got it all written down here. I'm going to share the spreadsheets. I'm going to share the cover letters and a bio that I had to write, some feelings about the bio that I have, particularly around sort of identity. And yeah, so we're jamming. We are jamming. So show and tell here. Let's first talk about, we talked about that. Okay, so bios. Okay, y'all, we live in a time of identity, and I am a queer person. I am bi. I am deaf in one ear, which means I'm disabled, a term that I have rejected for so long, because it's all relative, right? There's some folks that, are deaf in both ears, for example. So, and I have so much going for me, so much privilege and capacity that I've really rejected that word. This is a personal quest, but it's also a professional one because, for example, on one of these places that I just submitted to, they went out of their way to say, please indicate if you are X, Y, or Z, identifying disabled folks, queer folks, BIPOC, marginalized groups. They said, hey, if you belong to any of these, please identify those in your submission. So it's interesting because by default, I don't foreground those parts of my life. They're part of me, but it was interesting. So I had to done this once before, but I just wanted to share my little bio and how I've tried to put all that into words for myself. So Asa Merritt is a queer short story writer living in Mexico City. His work explores isolation, the uncanny, and paranoia informed by his life as a single-sided deaf person. It really has changed the way I write. Wild thing about losing your hearing, I only lost hearing in one of my ears a few years ago, is that my sense of taste, I have a sweet tooth, y'all, 41 years old, and all of a sudden I have a sweet tooth like my 5-year-old. It's crazy stuff. So all this stuff does work its way into my writing in many ways. And then the rest of this is the same as we saw before, kind of like professional accomplishments. But anyway, that was a moment during the last hour, was kind of reckoning with this idea of identity in 2025 and how that intersects with the publishing industry. So I just thought I'd share that. Updates on my beautiful spreadsheet. So by beautiful, I mean massively highlighted out here. I'm sharing it because you've seen this before, but I added it's growing. Okay, the spreadsheet is becoming more sophisticated, and that is exciting to me, and I'm excited to share that because I think, first of all, at some level, it's just like, okay, hey, wow, this is progress. The fact that I needed to expand this spreadsheet was exciting. Additionally, I added a couple columns. So for example, I added a date subbed spreadsheet. On the screen is a new column that says date subbed. So this is just like record keeping. Hitherto, I had just sent stuff and not noted when I had sent them. And you'll see here that there are several blacked out lines. These represent all the places that I have submitted it to today. So we are having a really good writing day here. I feel like I'm making progress, and I'm so grateful that you're here on this stream with me. Sarah Ray Werner says, Heather Sellers says, writing is the hardest thing you will ever do, even though it looks like you're just sitting there. Thank you for all your thoughts, everyone. Rock and roll. Rock and roll. What a time. What a time. All right. So moving on the list here, I'm going to work for roughly another hour or so, maybe a little shy of an hour. And the next thing I want to do is I have a peer's work that I owe them feedback on. And since I'm kind of well out already of any kind of raw creative space today, I'm going to keep the sort of analytical hat going and do that. I had plans to revise my other short story that I'm working on right now today a little bit. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm clearly running out of time. And yeah, like my best creative artistic work does happen earlier. Process. We're learning about process here. Here we go. What was valuable for me also is to kind of just see what I'm capable of in 3 hours, because some of these things in my writing life I'm doing for the first time, really. I haven't really been submitting to literary journals before. So there's these things that I just don't know how to calculate. And what's happening is that, of course, my eyes are bigger than my stomach. I think I can do X, Y, and Z in 3 hours, but it's like I can't. So what I did achieve right there is I was able to read through a story a friend sent and jot down some feedback for that. I'm excited. It's such a gift to have colleagues and peers in your life who inspire you. And I feel lucky to be in that place. And just having relationships with writers, so many different kinds over the years, it's a real gift. And, just what I also did, thinking about today and how today went, is I planned out tomorrow. So if you come on the stream tomorrow, I think what I'm going to do after the poem in the beginning is do like a full 90-minute deep writing session where I continue work on Night Ride, aka Runaway Story, just to really lock in, as they say, and kind of get to a deeper place with that story and do it earlier in the stream so that, I'm more connected to that kind of subconscious artistic space. And then also on deck tomorrow, I think I'm going to finish, if I don't finish it at home later, Virginia Woolf's Room of One's Own. Hi, Darnice. Hi, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Sarah, I'm glad you're here because that gives me a perfect transition to pitch our story club here on the channel. Sarah and I are working our way week by week through this collection, this rather anthology of short horror stories. And tomorrow at, I want to say 3, did we say 3 CT or EST? Tomorrow afternoon, in the Western Hemisphere, we are working our way through a story called Larger Than Oneself. Upon the death of his father, Vincent Kohner got out of mine owning, which had always been the family business, and invested heavily in popular journalism with himself as editor-in-chief. That is sentence 1 of Larger Than Oneself by Robert Aickman. Find it, read it, join us tomorrow, or don't read it and join us tomorrow because we always talk about what happens. Have a great day, everybody. Good morning, everyone. Hi, welcome. It's Asa. It's Thursday. We're writing. We're reading. Whew. I have a lot of goals in the next 3 hours that I want to accomplish. So I'm going to really kind of get through this first part today. As always, I'm going to read a little poetry. We're going to hit the great epic poem of the English language, Paradise Lost, Omeros by Derek Walcott, I think is a contender, but the original great epic poem of the English language, we're going to hit that today. If you see the eye patch, this is a new experiment. If you don't know, I'm deaf in my left ear, and one thing I've noticed is that sometimes I run into trouble when people don't know that. People can get really annoyed if they're trying to get by me, so I'm wearing this. It's a pirate patch. I bought it at a Halloween store to see if that signals people. Anyway, that's why I have a pirate patch on my ear. Anyway, the game plan here is we are going to read an excerpt from Paradise Lost. This is a copy I have had for 20 years. I can't wait to tell you about this specific copy. We are going to do some morning pages to warm up the mind, get in touch with the unconscious. I want to work on my short story, tentatively titled Night Ride, for about 50 minutes. And then, last but not least, I have in front of me today to read a story out of this anthology of short stories, The Dark Descent, edited by David Hartwell, Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost by John Milton, written hundreds of years ago, the greatest epic poem in the English language, newly annotated, As I said, this is quite an old copy of both mine, and it had a former owner, which is why I have particular affection for this book. I have not read this in maybe 20 years. I think I read it that long ago, so I only remember the experience of reading it, which was one of awe and delight. And I was blown away, if I recall. And just flipping through this collection again, I hope the spine lasts. We'll see. I had the really kind of cool experience of, on the first page, and it'll be hard to see this.
I don't know if you can tell. There's all this chicken scratch there on the first page. Those are words
that I wrote down that I did not know the meaning of, that I then I had the idea, at least, that I would look up. I didn't want to disrupt my reading experience by going to the dictionary. There were lots of words in this book that I didn't know. And I have this kind of cool moment right now where I'm looking at all these words I didn't know 20 years ago. And by gosh, I know a lot of them now. That said, there's still a bunch I don't know that I'm going to have to actually look up this time. So, words like serried, nocent, sedulous, that one I know now, venial, concupiscence. Is that the word that has to do with twilight? I think. Assaying. These are words that I'm like, I'm 60% on now, so that'll be fun. So in addition to my notes that I have from this book, I have the notes of whoever formerly owned this book. And if you've had the experience of buying books that had former owners, you'll have to contend with / enjoy, depending on the experience, their perspectives. I don't remember what I thought of this former reader's thoughts. There aren't so many, so we'll see. In any event, let's read. I'm going to throw it up on screen. We're just going to read the first little section here. This is the very beginning of this epic poem. Book 1. Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat, sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. Or if Sion Hill delight thee more, and Silo's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Ionian mount, while it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest. Thou from the first was present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like, satst brooding on the vast abyss, and madest pregnant. What in me is dark, illumine. What is low, raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. Woo! Milton, baby. It's on. It is on. All right. That is the poem of the day, the poetry of the day. I would love to just keep reading Paradise Lost every day. I don't know about y'all. Anyway, we're going to get the timer going. We are going to get into focus mode. Welcome. I appreciate you, y'all. Here we go. I want to share a couple passages. I did some revising of my short story, Night Ride, and I want to talk about this really cool serendipitous reading journey that's happened in things that I've recently read, how one thing's led to another, and how things have kind of very elegantly and kismet-y related to each other. At the very beginning, though, I want to talk about morning pages briefly. Normally, at least for me, and I think for many, morning pages serve as a dump of anxiety or negative emotions or things that you're trying to excise from your consciousness for a given artistic session, whether you're writing or painting. Hey, Evan, got a few hundred down before management gets in, so now I can chill and listen. So glad you're here, Evan. And anyone else in the stream, welcome. I'm glad you're here in community with me. So I wanted to say that sometimes things are good. And so I'm just going to read. I'm not going to get into my entire life here, but I did want to read just the beginning of these morning pages to show that it's like, okay, when it's good, it's good. And you got to say so. Good morning. Really feeling the energy this morning, the momentum. I feel fresh. Why? Concrete things. Exercise yesterday. Slept. Just one glass of wine. Reading to Elio. Up, that's my kid, reading Treasure Island. It's great. Up earlier with dogs. I think the micro changes are making a difference. Grateful for the momentum on YouTube and the community they're in. Anyway, it was like, okay. Morning pages I'm using to kind of like express gratitude, which I think also puts you in a good creative place. Anyway, that's that. So I want to turn to a couple excerpts from this story that I am working on to kind of talk through some of the edits I'm making and just kind of reflecting on my process right now and identifying. What I did there was like I went through and made edits. And then here in the last few minutes before sharing, I was like, what are these edits? Why am I making them? Why am I making them now in my writing journey? What kind of changes aesthetically am I pursuing? So let me just give you an example here. Not that. Good morning, Lore Huntress. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is just a little passage, okay? So I'll read it, and then I'll talk about these little track changes that I made. Here's the passage. So context, this is like a story about a kid who's running away from his abusive father. He's riding a bike away from that house in the middle of the night. All right. But tonight, without the trailer, he's on a four-wheeler. But tonight, without the trailer, and with the clear sky and the moon's light, which the treetops blunted, but still so bright, and the stars, all of them, always bright, every night, you could see just fine. And without the trailer, you could fly. And so I flew all the way down to the main road where I left the four-wheeler deep enough in the woods so that no one could see it from the road. So I just want to talk about some of these changes. The tonight was a change that seems so subtle and like not, okay, sure, whatever, why? Actually what happens is because so much of this story lives in this like descriptive place, as you can see from this passage, I added tonight because it just in a little way keeps us in a narrative place, propelling the story forward. One of the things I have going in this story is it's like it starts at the beginning of this evening and ends at dawn. And so just adding a little bit of a chronological element gives it a bit of a narrative frame. That's why I included that. Moon's light. Y'all, I first considered moonlight, right? We're talking about how it's clear, and I wanted to include the word light. So if you look closely there, before what I had was not moonlight. But tonight, without the trailer, and with the clear sky and the moon, before I thought, or sort of what came out was this idea that putting the word moon would be sufficient to convey a sense of light. But I wanted to be more concrete with it and really give us the image of light because he's describing what he's seeing on the ground, not so much the moon on the sky. So I first went to moonlight, but I discarded moonlight because I just think that moonlight is such a sort of broadly used term that actually it means so much more than moonlight. I'm on the fence about this one, but that's where I got to moon's light. It's a little perhaps clunky. It's like very literary, but I'm kind of with it because I think it actually has the specificity that I want. Onward. I hope you're into this. I know it's in the weeds, but I don't know. This is just exciting to me at least. So the next little change, what we have here is we have this light, the sort of field in the woods that this kid is riding through is lit by the moonlight and the stars.
but the moon is blocked here and there by trees, dulling the light. That was the word that I had before, dulling the light. But I changed it to blunted. Now, it's cool just to say this out loud because I don't know if I'll keep it. Saying it out loud kind of gives me a way to criticize it. Blunted felt more like physical, like the physical presence of trees as material objects blocking the tree, trying to stay as absolutely concrete with my imagery as possible. This is really where my writing is going. I have theories why, and I'll sort of talk about where I'm going with that in a second. And then the other things are kind of just like copy edits. In that, omit needless words, as Strunk and White tell us. So I just wanted to share that little passage. And then the next passage I want to share really relates to a bit of, Sarah Ray Werner says, yeah, blunted works super well. Moon's light flows better, I think, adds a poetic lyricism. I think so too. Okay, thank you for weighing in there. I want to talk about this other edit here, and it's a longer passage, and I will read the passage here in a second, but first I want to kind of talk about this fun reading journey that's happened to me in the last couple months, really towards a stream of consciousness style in my writing, which before now I never have written like that per se. And it's just cool how books can lead to books can lead to books. I mean, I started this Ray Bradbury challenge this month, trying to read one short story, one essay, one poem a day. That brought me to Woolf. Why Woolf? It's I'm always trying to read sort of politically adjacent stuff, A Room of One's Own, classic feminist text. Had never read it, bada boom, bada bing. Reading Woolf, not thinking about her as a fiction writer, not thinking about her as a novelist, and then reading her and just being oh wow, she, of course, is this stream of consciousness writer. Connecting that back to Jean Fosse, who I discovered several months ago, which incidentally, on this channel, Sarah and I discussed this guy, Laszlo. I stand by. Krasznahorkai, Hungarian author. So this guy, Laszlo, just won the Nobel Prize. Sarah and I read a story of his and talked about it here on the channel. And lo and behold, like Jean Fosse, the Norwegian Nobel Prize winner who wrote that book, Alice at the Fire, that I keep yapping about, also eschews punctuation, also writes in this sort of long sentence, minimal punctuation I'm reading here. A stream, not stream of consciousness, similarly invokes this tradition of stream of consciousness writing. Here's a quick example. This is from the story we read. This entire story has very few periods as well. This is called An Angel Passed Above Us. Going to read this sentence. I'm open to anything, he said, pushing the AK-47 a bit farther away and reaching under his bulletproof vest to scratch his armpit. Then continued, I'm glad I can at last say it all, since until now he'd had no opportunity. He'd only been able to mention one or two minor details whenever they'd had a breather. And it keeps going like that. And as you can see here, there's not a single period in that opening sequence. So, integrating that stylistic mode that's really speaking to me right now with a storytelling mode that is very imagistic, that virtually every sentence shows something that you can see, cinematic. Shirley Jackson does this, the American short story writer of The Lottery, Haunting of Hill House. Samantha Schweblin, Argentine short story writer, does this, who I love and adore. I'm wedding these two things that resonate for me as a reader into my writing in this passage, and trying to do my own thing also in this passage. So let me just show you the passage. I'm going to read it and then talk about it. Okay. By the way, if you're just joining the stream, I'm Asa. Love to write. Love to talk about writing. Glad you're here. Here we go. This is from my short story. A lot of drunk drivers out at this hour. Jake's Tavern stays open late. Deal with the police. And I know all about that because Rick Bauman always drank late there. Always with the drinking, they said. Jane deserves better, they said when we went to Jake's during the day for burgers. Rick, always with the drinking. And that's what they said after somebody killed him. Jane's brother, they said, had it in him. Always with the drinking, deserves better anyway. Yeah, so this is like my writing inspired by what I just described. And it's so exciting to map the sort of enthusiasm and delight and rush that I feel reading those other texts that I just shared into my own work. It's very cool, and I'm trying to do this in a way that is true to me, true to the story. And during that session, I also pulled out, Woolf, some fiction. Got this off the shelf, To the Lighthouse. I hadn't really revisited her fiction yet since kind of making all these connections. And so I read the first page to myself of To the Lighthouse, one of Virginia Woolf's novels, to be like, okay, so Virginia Woolf does stream of consciousness. How does she do it? What can I get there? And it's interesting because while stylistically this is clearly a forefather or sort of antecedent to what John Fosse, Laszlo, others are doing. You know, the whole first page here is one sentence. It's different from what I'm trying to do with this kind of like concrete action storytelling, in that it has this kind of inner reflectiveness. So I'm not going to read this whole page, but let me just get into a section that demonstrates what I'm talking about. To her son, these words conveyed an extraordinary joy. Is that something we can see? No. As if it were settled, the expedition was bound to take place. And the wonder to which he had looked forward for years and years, it seemed, was, after a night's darkness and a day's sail within touch. Since he belonged, even at the age of 6, to that great clan which cannot keep this feeling separate from that. Joys and sorrows. This is not cinematic. I don't know if I love the word cinematic here, but these are not images. This is reflection. This is kind of novelistic interiority, which, you know, is great, but it's not me. So it's cool to kind of just get more and more specific about this is where I'm at. And that's basically what happened there during that that last writing session. This story is very cool for me because it is unfolding. Shout out To the Lighthouse. Let me get that penguin cover, beautiful penguin cover up there for you. It's very cool, this story, because, my background is in screenwriting and dramatic writing, so obviously prose in general is new-ish to me, or sort of it's a mode that I'm still learning to swim in, as it were. But this story is different, even apart from that, because so much of it, ironically, given what I just said, is description. It's concrete, it's things you can see, but the story, it's a 4,000-word short story, and the kid it's just a bike ride. And so much of it is describing things that actually aren't even part of the bike ride. It's elements of this child's life, this child's world. They're 15, young person. And it's new, and it's funny because it feels right, and I'm doing my best to just trust that. And I can't wait to have a good editor, a really strong literary mind on this story, because it's like, I'm sure what I'm doing is I'm sure it's been done. So I'm just kind of like, what is this? Is it working? Yeah, it's cool to be kind of working in the dark in this way, and I'm trying to do my best to be comfortable in that dark, that creative space, which, I don't know, that's part of the fun, right? Writing yourself into a corner and then having to write yourself out, Hi, everybody. So I just read this essay by early 20th century French philosopher, mystic, writer named Simone Weil, which I don't know if that's how you pronounce their name or not. And what It was a really cool essay. It was a really cool essay. As I said in the beginning, this piece is, it's a writing about prayer, really, but specifically how school studies and the act of learning relates to that. And her central argument is how increased learning capacity translates to the ability for better prayer, connecting attention in prayer. How this relates to writing, I think, is very relevant. And there's two ideas here that I want to share from this essay that I think are useful for me, for us. Here we go. So I'm just going to read a couple passages here and then talk about them. Here's the first idea. Quite apart from explicit religious belief, every time that a human being succeeds in making an effort of attention with the sole idea of increasing his grasp of truth, he acquires a greater aptitude for grasping it, even if his effort produces no visible fruit. Even if our efforts of attention seem for years to be producing no result, one day a light that is in exact proportion to them will flood the soul. Every effort adds a little gold to a treasure no power on earth can take away. And so this is like a really encouraging thought, that giving your attention, yourself, to this sense of vocation, to this act of writing, will yield results, even if it doesn't in the present. I thought that was like a really cool, inspiring thought. It makes me think of that famous Ira Glass essay. Ira Glass, the famous radio host of This American Life, the NPR show, he says that when you're young and you're a creator, there's a huge gap between your taste and your capacity. And you know what good taste is, and you know good art when you see it, but you can't make it yourself because there's so many skills to develop, and they take such a long time to develop. And it's really an act of faith to try to make something good, because unless you're a genius, it takes a long time. So anyway, I thought that was inspiring and thought I'd share. The other idea that I liked in this essay that to me really relates to writing is this kind of rejection of the idea of like work hard, like effort, in that, how do I find the words here? I'll read the passage. Attention consists of suspending our thought, leaving it detached, empty, and ready to be penetrated by the object. So this idea of like not like scrounging around trying to find the best thing, but just kind of like getting to a state where the things bubble up to the surface. And I really love that idea as kind of a sense of creativity. This has been articulated a zillion ways, the idea of like an artist as a vessel, that bigger things, bigger than ourselves, are coming up through them and out. But I like that particular articulation of it. And then because it's so specific to writing, here's a continuation of that. A way of waiting when we are writing for the right word to come of itself at the end of our pen, while we merely reject all inadequate words. So it's just this cool idea of like, wait. Think, like create space, and the right words will appear. Food for thought. It reminds me of this. Some chess grandmaster once said, if you see a good move, wait, a better one will appear. Something to that effect. And chess grandmasters, they're always talking about their intuition at the same time. All related stuff. If you're making progress, please keep going. I wanted to share how that went for me. I really fell into a great writing zone there, especially at the last half of that 50 minutes. Got to the end of the story again with a new sense of purpose, propulsion, mission. I want to share everything that I just did there. I'm so excited about it. So some small things and some little things. I mean, the big thing really is that I reverted to the original climax that I had written. This is a story about a kid running away from their abusive father, riding a bike away from that house in the middle of the night. The climax of the story is when the father finds the kid on the side of the road. Early drafts had the father assaulting the child there on the road. This, and then subsequent rewriting this week, put that climax into doubt, because it was something that happened to the kid. I didn't think the kid had a ton of agency there, I thought that perhaps a more dynamic climax would be if the child took action against the father in that moment. This was kind of all this revising that I was thinking about, inspired by Faulkner and some of his short stories. Y'all, my first instinct was right. That's what I just found out this past little session. It's like, no. That is what was supposed to happen. I got deeper into the story, started reading it from the top again, and saw that that actually is the organic and still surprising climax from the story that I've set up in terms of this kid thinking that his father is never going to hit him. That is what this story is. That is the before and after moment of this short story. The watershed moment in this kid's life is that while this father hitherto had been super abusive and verbally abusive and just violent, had never actually struck his children, the surprise of that, I think, is essential. And in any event, it just was like, okay, what you had before was the move. So keep it. A little bit of like a more micro change here that I just wanted to quickly share here. This is like a little copy edit. This is a before and after, and I just want to show this one little like line that I cut. So I'm going to read the original and then I'll read the new. This is the same story, an earlier passage. I'm not thinking any of these things. I'm in third gear, staying quiet, staying low, but staying slow, but not too slow, because the four-wheeler is actually louder when it's in second gear, and I'm driving towards the gate and passing through. Dad's not going to wake up, but I'm quiet anyway. Take no chances. I need to ride. I need tonight. So I go slow, and now I'm past the gate and onto the driveway, and I'm in fourth. I cut those two lines, I need to ride and I need tonight, because it was sort of editorial in this way that I didn't like. It was kind of like telling, not showing in this way that felt not so much like cheap, but it's kind of like, can you do this more elegantly? I think that I can, because the paragraph finishes as follows. Now I'm past the gate and onto the driveway, and I'm in fourth, and I'm turning the throttle towards me, and the four-wheeler lurches forward faster, and now, oh God, yes, I'm flying. And so I feel like I still get that in that sense in a way that's more dynamic, so I was like, I'm going to chop that. Anyway, that's just one little tiny thing. And then a more significant, this is more of like an RIP moment for this short story here on this live stream with you, because I cut a darling, as they say. I don't know who it was. Fitzgerald? I think a lot of people have said it. Cut your darlings, kill your darlings, referring to passages that you like and then cut because they don't quite fit. And I'm just going to honor, mourn, and say goodbye to a passage that fits that description in this story. And I'll just read it and then I'll tell you why I cut it. So I'll read this extended piece and then most of it got cut. We're still with the kid. He's on his four-wheeler prior to getting on the bike. But tonight, without the trailer and with the clear sky and the moon's light, which the treetops blunted, but still so bright, and the stars, all of them, always bright, every night, you could see just fine. And without the trailer, you could fly. And so I flew all the way down to the main road, where I left the four-wheeler deep enough in the woods that no one would see it from the road. The woods were off limits, timber company land, but they never came, they never went there, and the no trespassing signs didn't stop anyone from hunting. And the real risk of going in there was not getting seen by the timber company and arrested, but getting shot. Dad forbade us from going there, but we still went, and when we did, we wore hunter orange so we wouldn't get shot. And I really think we might have, because we often found kill sites where some terrible person left the buck's body but took its antlers. But we still liked going into those woods. We sure did. We loved those woods, the timber company land. And I have no idea why, but it didn't seem like they were going to ever cut down those trees. They didn't even thin it. And that's why all the big bucks hanged out there all day in the brush, in the thickets. Thickets so thick that most of those poachers probably walked by them all the time. Bye. Bye. So I deleted most of this, and I deleted the whole section there about the forest and the deer and the hunters and the poachers and the antlers and sneaking into the forest, because y'all, it doesn't belong. And if it doesn't belong and I can't justify it, it's got to go. It doesn't belong because nothing here, first of all, it doesn't further the story, right? There's no narrative motion here happening. But that's not the end of the world, particularly in this story where there is a lot of description that is not pushing the story forward. So it's like that in and of itself doesn't disqualify it for this story. But nothing in here is giving us any kind of thematic meat related to the relationship between the boy and his father, connected to this pivotal before and after experience of this child. It's just like world building. It's just like texture. And I love it. It's vivid. It's specific. It's descriptive. It is characterization. It does characterize the brothers' relationship at some level. There's a brother in this story, and their bond is essential. Developing that could potentially justify this passage, but I don't think it does. I don't think it does. So it had to go. So I just wanted to share that little bit with y'all as well. What else? Oh, yeah. In the ending, I changed the ending too. We'll get to that. In another break, if not today, then next week. But I realized that the ending that I wrote was symmetric in this way that was meeting a certain kind of expectation for a certain kind of story, but wasn't true, or wasn't as true as it could be. And I wrote something that I think is more true just now, and I'm really excited about it. But I'm going to let that kind of live in this like excited state, and not try to analyze it yet because it's still so fresh. I hope everyone's making progress. Good luck. Good luck with whatever you're working on. How's everybody doing? Welcome back. All right. So during that last little bit there, I kind of just looked back at all the streams this week, looked at the things I read, what I wrote, and just to reflect on how the week went, which is a bit of a endeavor given the variety of things that happened. But I think ultimately that actually is the significance of this week, is that how much I accomplished, how much I read, how I always tell myself I'm not doing enough, I'm not reading enough, I'm not writing enough, I'm not submitting enough. And one thing that I found working so diligently this week live with y'all is that, okay, you are putting in a lot of time and you are not wasting this time. And look what you did during this time. And it's giving me permission to think about my progress in a healthier way, I think, because it's like, it's going to take as long as it's going to take. You know, I've had so many kind of benchmarks, goals, one story a week, and it's like, no. It's going to take as long as it's going to take. And it doesn't matter if it's taking a long time because of the amount of time you're putting in. It couldn't be happening any faster. And it just could be an opportunity for me in the future to that's a whole little quota, a block of energy, anxious about what I'm not doing, that can now go to writing and just not do that, which relates to what we talked about earlier and attention, and that should be going to the writing. So I hope you had a fine Friday of writing. I hope you have a great weekend. I don't know if I'll be here on the weekends, still figuring that out, but I'll certainly be back on Monday. I appreciate you. Talk soon. You made it. You made it to the end. Thank you for spending this time with me. It's an honor. I appreciate you. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments what your favorite part of this video was, what resonated, what spoke to you, what inspired you. I want to lean in to what's resonating. And I know this was a long video, so I just want to kind of highlight or learn what highlighted for you. You can also hit the like button on this video. Here I am asking for that. YouTube's a wilderness, folks. It's hard. It's hard to get seen. And being seen lets me see you. And that's what this is about. Have a good day.